Hi guys, how are you doing? Everything okay? Today I wanted to tell you how my book came to be. I wanted to give you an insight in the writer's mind. Now, I don't think I'm the quintessential writer since I'm only an amateur writer at the moment, but I've been writing all my life, and this one came to be in a particular way, in the sense that I had these two stories running around in my head for well, maybe 10 years or so. And I used to write the stuff down to get it out of my head. So when after 10, 12 years, these stories kept running around, I had to do something. I had to write them down. I had to. It's in the words of Stephen King, the great horror writer. He once said it would be suicide not to do it. So the two stories that ran in my mind was one where America invaded Brazil because they thought Brazil was harboring terrorists. And during that story, um, the Americans obviously had the overwhelming power, but during that story, the Brazilians had a medical thing they did to enhance their soldiers so they could um, free their land. Many of the things that are in the story, not all of it, many of the things were already there. Not the end, because there was no end where people took rockets and uh, flew to the sky or flew to space. That ending was not there, but the story was there. The second story I had in my head, I'm a very big Star Trek fan, so I had something in my head that the crew of the Enterprise discovered a long lost colony system, a star system where colonies were formed and where there were still the old country divides and stuff. So there was still all the countries were there, only they were living on different moons and planets and stuff. And they were attacked by an invisible enemy, which later turned out to be the Romulans. Now, when I started to write this down, and I do this on my computer, when I started to write this down, in the event of wanting to publish this book, which I learned was pretty easy these days with ebooks on Kindle or on Amazon, I had to lose all the Star Trek stuff. And I wanted to begin with that story. I thought that story was the interesting one, which was going in down in space and stuff. So I started writing the second story down without the Star Trek thing. And I thought, I have that second story. What am I going to do with it? And the intention was to put it down as flashbacks through the entire book. When I started to do that, those flashbacks became so big they became chapters in their own right. So then I thought, I'm gonna tell these stories separate. But the problem with that was that there was a big gap between the escape that eventually would occur on Earth and the alliance that was already there in, 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 in the second story. So I had to devise a third story to make a link between them. And since I was already writing it down in flashback scene style, I was going to do that in flashback style too. So the concept of the book became that you first get a chapter of the far future, then you get one of the in between future, and then you get one of the recent future, which gave me the unique perspective or unique opportunity to put in like hints of what actually already happened, because it was in the past. For the Alliance, it was in the past. But you didn't know about it yet because I hadn't written about it yet. And some of the things that I write down, sometimes I write this small subplot, and it only gets its payback later in the book when I write about the stuff that happened before. And I thought it was work for me. It was working well, so I kept that uh, aspect in the story, and that's a bit how my book came to be. Now, I say I have stories in my head. Of course, these stories weren't complete. They evolved during the writing. Sometimes they evolved in a way that I put myself into some problems because I had these challenges that I had to in the next phase of the book I had to take with it and resolve or something. But it's a process. It's an ongoing process. So I told you a bit about what my book is all about. I gave you some hints about the science thing where they enhance the soldiers and stuff. I'm actually hoping I intrigued you a bit, intrigued you enough to maybe buy the book, maybe read it, or if you could suggest it to somebody, share this information with people who read science fiction and fantasy and stuff. It's a science fiction adventure, actually, this one. So maybe you could share it with somebody who wants to read it. And that was what I wanted to tell you today. As always, I will leave a link in the description should you be interested in my book. And I hope you are all well, and we see each other later.